This podcast is brought to you by Innovid. Folks, we have our answer. There's been a lot of speculation about what the combination of Flash Talking and Innovid would be called. Flashavid? InnoFlash? We've got our answer at Marketecture Live, and it's Innovid. But not just any Innovid, it's a new Innovid. Innovation, intelligence, independence, the eyes have it. Check out new.innovid.com to learn more about how they're merging their ad tech stacks and shaking up the industry. That's new.innovid.com. And as ever, this ad could have been an email.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. This is Ari Papara. I'm joined by Eric Franchi. So today's episode, we're going to play a great conversation we recorded at Marketecture Live. It was one of the most popular sessions we had on the main stage, where two really smart guys talk about really smart ad tech stuff. It's Mike O'Sullivan and Chris Kane from respectively The Trade Desk and Jounce, and they're talking about all kinds of stuff. They told me they were doing Frost v. Nixon for ad tech. So you can, if that makes sense to you, I don't know, get out of the house. Eric, did you see this live when you were at the event?
Yeah, it was so good. It was Marketecture perfection. Like two of the smartest people on like the deepest things in ad tech, just, giving them the floor for an extended period of time. This was so good.
Okay, well, we hope you enjoy that. And then Eric and I will come back and do the refresh and talk about the news. Also, if you're listening to the podcast stream, you probably got a bonus episode from our new podcast from Marketecture called The Brand Forum, where co-founder Jeremy talks with Josh Palau, and they bring in lots of interesting guests from the brand world. So one episode's out. Please go on Spotify or Apple TV and find the Brand Forum and hit that subscribe button to get updated. It's going to come out every other week, and I hope you like it. All right, let's go right to the recording. Thanks.
I'm just going to put that on loop on my iPod.
Every time I listen to the podcast, I always think, who made that little beep, boop, 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 and how much did Ari pay for it? Because it sounds professional, but I was like, where did he get that?
So let me try to set this thing up. Mike and I have been trading a zillion emails over the last couple of weeks about this discussion, because what we're going to talk about really is a debate that he and I have on an ongoing basis about signals in the bid stream. And so I'm going to take a swing at setting this up, and then Mike, you can kind of add in or correct me if you see it differently, and then we'll get into the details. But the debate in general that we have, and the debate that we're going to do our best to sort of have here, is related to sort of what I think is some grayness in the way that publishers and their SSP partners communicate information about the available inventory in a bid request. And what Mike and I were talking about earlier was there's some ways of structuring signals in a bid request that make you a Boy Scout, and there's ways of structuring signals in a bid request that make you a fraudster, and that there's not a explicit, binary separation of those two things. There's some spectrum, there's some gray area in between. And so what we kind of want to talk about is that gray area and sort of how to restore some trust in the integrity of signals that are in bid requests. Mike, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think I have a lot of sympathy for publishers. I think Chris is going to take more the sell side point of view, and I'm going to take more the buy side point of view. But we both see both sides. And I do have a lot of sympathy for publishers. And the one thing I would just underline is a lot of these decisions and topics we'll discuss, like ID bridging. I understand why publishers do it from a revenue perspective, right? Like that is the resource, that they're focused on. But I do think there is another resource that they may not realize they're spending, which is this concept of trust. And so like how far you go into the gray, it, maximizes revenue, but also spends a different currency, which is trust.
Yeah. Trust is on a long timeline though, and dollars on a very short timeline. I think Andrew Casale gets credit for this thing. There's this line that I've heard, I think I've actually heard it mostly from you, that the bid request is a contract, that it is this sort of commitment from the sell side to the buy side, that this is an accurate and honest expression of my available inventory. And so that's the thing that we're going to kind of push on a little bit. I think we'll start with one that hopefully is sort of illustrative for everybody, gives us something to agree on before we disagree on other things. One of the fields in the bid request for web inventory is the site.domain field. It's supposed to declare the domain where the ad's going to run. If you lie about that, you get in trouble. I think we both agree that spoofing that piece of information is sort of clearly crossing that bright line into fraud territory. I guess the question that I have for you, Mike, is why is it so obvious to everyone in this room, to you, to me, that misrepresenting the site.domain field is not in the gray area and is sort of like obviously fraudulent, obviously eligible for clawbacks, obviously outside of industry norms?
Yeah, I think my view on that is actually tied to something that we've also discussed a lot, which is like publishers invest a lot in having quality experiences and quality media and, you know, the equity they've built up in a brand or what have you. For someone to basically usurp and misrepresent themselves as that, to me, is a big reason like why that is unacceptable, because, you know, this is not necessarily, we use the term contract, but it's such misrepresentation because the entire opportunity is viewed through a different lens based on that one field. Right. So it's like I'm a buyer and I may I use things like historically would have been called white lists, allow lists, block lists. And that is a big lever for choosing whether or not to buy. And moving on and misdeclaring that domain, I think one, triggers that publisher quality point, but then two, is basically bypassing the buyer's filters.
I obviously agree with that. I'll build it out just a little bit more to maybe create some counterpoints for later. There's at least a decade, maybe 2 decades of the industry grappling with that issue, and there's broad consensus that that's out of bounds. There's a bunch of specs that are meant to sort of protect specifically against this. Ads.txt comes top of mind for me. There's a whole universe of verification companies that aren't perfect, of course, but try really hard to detect this sort of stuff. The spec is written in an extremely explicit way about, there's just no ambiguity of what site is this? It's like all of those things to me sort of lend themselves to a place where you can trust that signal. And I see very, very little examples of misrepresentation of the domain. I assume that checks out with what you see. Let's talk about an area that I don't think lines up with any of the things I just said, floor prices. Mm-hmm. If my actual price as a publisher is a 10-cent floor, I will sell the impression for 10, I won't sell it for 9, really, I'll walk away at 9. Do you expect me as a publisher to express that 10-cent floor, from your vantage point at the trade desk? Do you expect me to present a 10-cent floor in the bid request?
I guess what I would love to see is if you're calling something a floor, make it be a floor. And so, what floors are nowadays is essentially a bobbing lure in the ocean trying to get the DSP to bite. And so, how many publishers, I don't know how many publishers in the room, when was the last time you guys were we're going to go set a bunch of floors across our SSPs? It doesn't happen. Okay, correct. I stand corrected, but the exception proves the rule. What we would see when I was at an SSP is that floors would become fossilized, and we're gee, this floor hasn't changed in 2 years. Oh my God. And we would have conversations why even have floors? Why not let all of the demand move into the primary ad server and the top bid win or not win, right? Because the number of SSPs that publishers are using is skyrocketing. So you're doing 20, 30, 40 floor updates across all those SSPs and placements per day. We also see, obviously, the amount of dynamic floors that are present. So I guess the problem I have with this one is we would love if these were actually floors, but we see that a lot of times it's goal seeking and trying to goose out spend, and it's an external expression of a margin optimization solution, and moreover, it just doesn't represent an actual floor.
Isn't that kind of the job of sellers, to coax higher bids out of the buy side? If I'm in the real estate market, I'm not going to communicate to the market the absolute minimum price that I'll sell my home for. In fact, I'm going to hire an agent to try to coax the highest possible bids out of buyers as
awesome.
Possible.
Make a recommendation for OpenRTB 2.7 called recommended price or minimum bid for consideration or something like that. Don't hijack the floor object to specify that. I'm not saying sellers can't do those types of things. I'm just saying why is it in the floor object?
Is there a credible way for companies on the buy side to sort of change that incentive so that publishers are rationally incentivized to like truly communicate the 10-cent value, not some inflated version of it?
Yeah, I think there are ways. Like, I wonder, is there a future in, like, I'm not saying don't do dynamic floors, but if I were a DSP or if I was a bidding engine, not speaking on behalf of any large public companies here, but if I was a bidder and it's like, oh, this is floor type 1, publisher set versus floor type 2, systemic optimization, it's not like I won't bid when it's floor type 2, but I'll understand how to approach it differently versus floor type 1 is an actual expression from the publisher themselves. So I do think there are ways to sort of build our way out of this, I guess, on this particular object.
All right, I got one more for you on floors. Okay. There's, borrowing your language, floor type 1, floor type 2. There's publishers trying to sort of be advocates for driving up their own prices. And then there's SSPs sort of overriding what is communicated to them by publishers in order to further extract revenue from DSPs. Based on what you guys see through OpenPath integrations, which I think has got to be pretty close to the source of truth for the type 1 situation, how much of the optimization of floors that you see in the bid stream is initiated by SSPs trying to modify the publisher's floor?
I don't know if I have like an exact number, but I would say it's very pervasive in terms of like where the floor optimization is coming from. And I would say for the most part, it's software optimization. I also, like, again, I don't have a problem functionally with that type of feature. I'm just curious, like, if it is their job, if I, take what you just said and play it out, it's their job to, extend and grow revenue. Great. How much of that additional floor revenue is going to the publisher?
Yeah, and I'm not sure there's a way to know, right? Like, you know what you spent, the publisher knows what they've got, but it's really hard to reconcile that impression to impression. Okay, let's talk video signals. There's been a forever long debate in the industry about what constitutes in-stream video. There was a redefinition of what in-stream video means in 2022. I think this is going back to our domain spoofing thing. To my mind, this is a good example of where the number of words in the OpenRTB spec give you like a pretty good clue about how abused a signal has been. And the new definition of in-stream is like so ridiculously explicit that I think speaks to sort of this stretching or misrepresentation over time. We're both in agreement of a variety of sort of best practices for how to transact video, so I'm not sure we're gonna have much of a debate on this one, but I do wanna ask you about lessons learned. You were close to this thing. What did we learn as an industry from the redefinition of in-stream signals, or in general, the redefinition of video signals, the way the whole migration happened? Like, what are your takeaways from attempts to improve the trustworthiness of that signal? And how should we be sort of applying those sorts of lessons to other things that are currently unreliable signals in the bid stream?
Yeah, so I took two elements away. So one, I'd sent Chris, actually we probably should have just kept this one slide, but there is this CIA handbook on when your country has been invaded and how to be like a passive form of resistance against the regime. And it's like, sign up for a bunch of committees and industry bodies in the interest of helping things along. Always ask questions, interject constantly, ask, what does this mean to us? And blah, 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 blah. And it was just like, God, Lee, feels like I'm like reading about like whether it's IAB or pre-bid, like there are these situations and they're, as Chris mentioned, like these institutions are very important, but they can be gamed to the extent of like, just outlast everyone else, extend it out, and like keep the meetings going. What about this? Extend the language, more ambiguous. So for me, the first thing I learned is like there are weaknesses in our current approach to frameworks that can be exploited by motivated individuals and companies is sort of point one. But then point two, actually, it made me sort of just like think about and honestly worry about the open internet, or open web as Ari calls it, more broadly, because there's this sort of gaming and back and forth about a specific field in video, but it made me just realize, like, by default, OpenRTB is open, right? Like it's default on. Right, like when you're buying, it's like, oh, a publisher added a new ad unit, I added something new here, we've got a new property, and when you start to sort of like mix these things together, whether it's video placement declaration or another video one, in banner video, right? That just sort of has been rising in popularity. And if we don't declare these things properly, like what's the terminus of this type of thing? We've got buyers who are default open, default on, and we can't tell what's actually happening because of ambiguity in a field. The terminus is either one of two things. Buying systems become default closed, and you gotta, basically ask to be added to an inclusion. Or worst case scenario, all the buyers are like, this is too complex, let's just go to walled gardens.
From the perspective of a publisher, obviously both of those are like quite alarming. I'm not sure what a publisher could reasonably do today, though, other than perpetuate bad signals, whether it's in-banner video or whatever. It's one of these things where if I, as a publisher, am not sort of stretching the truth on what I'm going to call in-stream video, or I'm not making my banner ads eligible for in-banner video, no one's sort of like parading me up on stage here and sort of saying, spend more money with these good guys. It's just that DSPs, Trade Desk, and others send money to the publishers that are most aggressive.
Yeah.
How do I not do some of these things as a publisher?
And this is where I think it's actually not just like a sell side beat up session. Like buyers have a significant responsibility here. Like this ultimately ends with buyers, and they vote with their wallet. And buyers need to be faster to react to these types of in the gray. I'll call them like exploits or stretches of the imagination. Let's call it. Buyers need to act faster, and it's not about like publicly parading people up and making a big deal of it. It's like, do we like this? No, yes or no? Let's move on. And like bid accordingly. I
mean, in a way, that framing makes it sound like default off might actually be what's necessary to create the right incentives. That only there's no shortage of supply in this industry. Only verifiably high integrity supply chains get demand, or get demand at sort of like full throttle. Is that where we're going?
I think that is where we're going. I think that's different than default off slightly, because like it's the bid value can vary. It's not binary necessarily. Like there is the decision to bid, and then there's the value of the bid. I do sympathize, and I am empathetic to publishers, because you need to be in the gray to earn like that, your revenue, and especially if you have your competitors are in the gray, right? And so like ID bridging is a great example. Like, was I rewarded for not doing ID bridging? Oh, actually, the folks who were doing ID bridging, they were rewarded. So I think this is where I think buyers have a bigger role to play. And I don't necessarily mean like being on stage and things like that. It's more just on executing relentlessly on finding the things that you want to value and the things you don't want to value, so that there is no incentive for publishers to do it. And the last thing I would just say on the video side is, if we can't tell with a video opportunities like, hey, this property does in-banner video and they have a video player, it's like, well, there's a chance that this could be having two videos running simultaneously. Let's just not bid on any videos from this property. Right? So like, because of the limitation, because it's been sort of hidden in this, video declaration, we don't know if there's concurrent videos playing back in this like dystopian experience, which I'm sure we've all had, where you load a web page and you're like, God, what, 3 videos playing simultaneously? And your laptop's about to take off because it's like a 4K ad in the bottom right or something running. So like the downside there is just like, there's a downside to sort of saying, hey, we've blended this in-banner video such that you can't tell versus the other video. And it's like, well then, what do you think we're going to do if we don't want in-banner video?
So keep playing that out, and you're welcome to switch this to bridging, which I think could also be a good example of it. It feels to me that there is this history, I was actually talking with somebody in the hall about this earlier, that there's this history of, okay, Boy Scouts are over here, and the fraudsters are over here, and there's this gray thing in the middle. And I don't want to be a Boy Scout, I don't want to be a fraudster, I got to find the right spot in the middle. I think there's even an argument like, actually, it'd be way better to be close to the fraud side than the gray area side, because the worst thing that has ever happened with any of this stuff, multiple videos on a page, injection of user IDs in the bid stream, whatever, is a slap on the wrist. No one's ever been banished from this industry. And so I'll just wait for the slap on the wrist, and I'm going to take the revenue benefits as long as this game lasts, and then I'll take a half a step away from that.
I think like if you know Will Doherty and you follow him at the next industry conference, I think you may change your mind on like whether anyone's been permanently punished, because people are like, Will, can I have a minute? Like I want to discuss like how do I get out of the penalty box or what's going on? So like I made slightly challenge like on specifics, but I take your overall point around like where the incentives are. And I think that just comes back to how quickly we need to execute on discovering these and just like not make it an incentive for publishers. Let's invert it and take it out of all this negative stuff. And like I talked a little bit about this, if I can, Ari, sorry, at the Trade Desk Forward event, where it's just like we're investing so heavily and historically as an industry in detecting bad and identifying bad and like this is, deep gray versus light gray versus ash or whatever. And it's like, what is quality? What is super good bid requests look like? What do amazing publishers look like? Because if publishers are saying...
Do they even exist anymore though? Or is everybody sort of beaten into having to stretch the truth?
I think, knowing that it's easy to be cynical about our space. Like nobody ever got sort of like booed off a stage for being cynical about ad tech. But you guys affected monstrous change with MFA. So change is possible around quality. And I would argue, if companies start saying, we think this is what great quality looks like, and there's guidance to publishers, right? I do think that publishers are like, oh, I'll earn more if I have transaction ID appended. I'll earn more if my GPIDs aren't warping all over the field. And I can see it when I turn it on the same way I can see with ID bridging. I think there is a future there, but in both cases, like the upside as well as like downside risk mitigation, we just have to cycle faster about making those changes, visible to pubs.
We're almost at time. Quick last question. And obviously only share what you can, but Sincera's one of the very few companies that have ever been brought into the trade desk externally. Presumably there's some interesting ideas you and the team have. Can you share anything about sort of the future of Trade Desk providing more of that feedback to publishers and the direction that you want to take so that publishers understand more specifically when their signals are sort of perceived to be useful versus, questionable?
Yeah, so what I would say is the same thing I told Alice and Schiff, who's somewhere here, is for those folks who know Sincera, like we are very focused on publisher quality and giving feedback to publishers. And when we started, we worked with the Trade Desk to do the first Global 100, SP 500, and publishers would come to us and be like, what do I need to do to get better? It's like, yes, I know I suck at something, but like, how do I get better? And we were focused on that problem. And what I would say is we are still extremely focused on that problem. The only thing that changed is the W2.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having us.
This podcast is brought to you by JWP Kinetics. JWP provides the technology that manages and delivers video, maximizes visitor engagement, and monetizes it through positive ad experiences. Find out more about how JWP Kinetics can help your company achieve results at jwplayer.com. That's jwplayer.com.
All right, and we are back. Welcome to the refresh, everybody. Bunch of stuff to talk about today. So we will talk about the Analytics report that dropped last Friday. We will talk about Applovin, and then a little trend that we're picking up on. Fee wars amongst DSPs and those competing for ad budgets. So a bunch of stuff to get into here. All right, let's start with analytics. Christoph strikes again. So the firm alleged that verification firms are not catching ads that are being served to bots or otherwise invalid or non-human traffic. Back up, 40% of the internet's is bots or non-human. And the article claims that DVIS and Human, those were the three companies that were called out, serve ads to these bots and or miss non-human traffic. And the question is, this is where a lot of the debate has been, are brands paying for this? And is this technology like not doing its job?
Yeah, so there are distributed, well-known lists of bots. So you hear bots, you think bad stuff. It's not true. Google search bot, it collects information so you can be in the search engine. There are hundreds, thousands of bots out there. And there are lists that are provided to people of those bots so that you can know it's a bot. What I think the allegation here is that these companies were not blocking bot traffic and bots were seeing ads, even though it was, in one sense, very easy to detect them. But we don't know if anyone was paying for them. That's kind of a big open question. We also know that the providers, especially Human, has in the past said that they don't want to block bots because it would give a signal to the bot owners that they would use and alter their behavior. And you're better off letting it through and then giving reports later on. So that's the two sides of the coin. And as with many analytics reports, and I think one of the criticisms of analytics, which is totally valid, is that it's very hard to see if this is a minor problem or a big problem. The volume numbers are essentially impossible to know unless you are in kind of an ad server situation. So it'd be interesting to hear if an ad server like a Mediaocean Innovid could come back to us and say, here's how much of spend was wasted on these non-blocked bots.
Yeah, that's right. Ad Exchange had a very deep article on this. We'll put it in the newsletter. We'll point people to it. And the verification companies, DV and IAS, both came out with responses relatively quickly. And then DV was very definitive and clear in their response, which is basically this. DV identifies bots nearly 100% of the time, and brands don't pay for ads served to bots. IAS's response was different. It was a walkthrough of the technology, and on my read, and I only read it once, they didn't make the same statement that brands are not paying for bot traffic. So that was the difference there. And I don't think Human gave a statement at all.
We've had Chris at the Marketecture Live. He does PR and mod up for Double Verify, and he's whipped them into shape, man. They are responsive. Yeah. They're on top of things. I do question this assertion that brands don't pay for it because effectively a verification company like Double Verify isn't really in the flow of money. They can tell the brand don't pay for this, but whether the brand actually pays or not is a matter of negotiation and conversation. So in some cases, brands might actually be paying for it. Yeah,
I guess that's the right question. Okay. Well, I think this is not the last we're going to hear about this issue. This is not the last that we're going to hear from Analytics.
It's a whole ecosystem. He publishes a report. The Wall Street Journal gets a scoop. You and I get something to talk about. Double Verify PR gets something to talk about. And the world moves on.
And it always happens on a Friday, the day after we record. So the one feature request for Christoph is, if you're going to do this, just push it up and have it drop on a Wednesday. That's just the minor.
Wednesday would be ideal, not Thursday. Don't deliver news on Thursday if you want to cover it in the Marketecture pod. Wednesday.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Let's move on. So Applovin, we've talked about Applovin a bunch over the course of the past year. Stock was up, or is up, still 700%, despite it going down. And they've been under attack by short sellers. There was a report last week or the week prior from, I think it was called Muddy Waters, with a bunch of allegations. You did an awesome breakdown, as usual, of both sides of the Applovin argument, the bull and the bear case, in the newsletter this week. And I thought what was interesting is Applovin. So the CEO Adam Feroji has generally been kind of like not press shy. I don't think he's, does press much, if at all. We haven't heard his voice all that much in the market, despite the business just being on this incredible trajectory. He started writing blog posts, explaining Applovin's business, explaining how things work, and really being on the proactive here and outlining effectively your bull case on it. I'll pull a quote from his blog post when we talk about it. So, he's talking about how they get tens of billions of dollars of spend from sophisticated marketers. I'll start the quote. If we weren't delivering, advertisers would go bankrupt or stop paying, yet our collections are rock solid. That's a testament to the sharp minds driving these decisions and the real value we provide.
Yeah, I think the proof's in the pudding. If the customers are smart and they're not being defrauded, then the customer should be expected to move their budget where it works. We do know that mobile marketers are pretty smart, and the mobile marketers are seeing these reports and they're looking for themselves. And there was sort of a little bit of a mob on Twitter who was pressure testing some of the Applovin results, and they came back and said, it's pretty good. So I think those facts are more important than many of these forensic analyses of exactly the way the data flows around. That said, at some point, there could be some revelation that they are doing something that is wasting marketers' money in some way. I don't want to say illegal or fraudulent. I want to say wasting marketers' money, because if a marketer finds out they're not getting the ROAS they think they're getting, they will dial back. And to my knowledge, they haven't found that out yet. It's interesting. I was at a dinner last night that had a lot of media and finance people, and I would say this was the most discussed topic that I heard, which I wouldn't expect if you hang out with a bunch of, media Wall Street people. But really, Applovin and the short sellers, and the general consensus from these sort of business hedge fund analyst types people was effectively exactly what we said. No smoking gun. If the money keeps flowing, it sounds good to me. Let me know if Apple's going to do anything.
The other piece here that I think is newsworthy is, outside of Adam started to go on the offensive, the company is going on the offensive. It has lawyered up and hired Quinn Emanuel to investigate the claims from the short sellers. So with this Muddy Waters report that came out last week, basically said Applovin was misusing data and breaking rules set by some of the partners, caused the stock to drop 20%. And then Applovin announced that they were lawyering up, and the stock came back. So I think that the market likes what they're seeing out of the company. Keep an eye on it.
I never like the suing the short sellers approach, but it seems to be part of the playbook.
Yeah.
And the short sellers tend to be small guys, and then they have to lawyer up, and nothing good ever comes of this whole thing.
Unless you're a lawyer, and if you're a lawyer, you're getting paid.
There was a little side drama on this whole thing, which was for some unknown reason, Adam's blog post said written by Grok, which is like a couple of questions immediately come to mind, which is first, like, why can't you write your own blog post? Secondly, even if you did use an AI to help write your blog post, why would you tell everybody? Third, why Grok of all AI systems is not known as the one people are using to cheat on their homework just yet. And the immediate speculation is this was like to draw the attention of a certain ketamine-influenced billionaire. And it did. Like, that person who will remain nameless immediately was like, oh, look, he wrote it using Grok. And it's just a sign of our times that, you have to wave a certain kind of flag in the air to get attention.
Not to give Chris, too much more airtime, but he's the one, Chris Harhar, he's the one that pointed out that that blog post, which was excellent, by the way, very well written.
Very well written.
End, there was the footnote, and I don't know the exact language, but effectively something to the effect of, kind of created by Grok, and then Adam edited. Is that how it was written?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the wording, but I know if I was a major public company CEO, I would just be shit posting using Grok all day. It seems to help your stock price. There's a little correlation here.
Chris's point was, this is an awesome post, and this line right here is all that we're going to talk about. And it seems like that is the case. We should talk about Grok.
Do we have to? Yes.
I want your take on this. Yeah, I want your take on this. So XAi, which is the AI company that Elon Musk owns, acquired X last week. So basically, it's a $45 billion price tag, including $12 billion in debt, and XAi is valued at $80 billion.
Sure.
What's your take on this whole thing?
It's just financial engineering, clearly.
Yeah.
So we all know that Elon overpaid for X. A $45 billion price tag immediately wasn't worth that amount, maybe worth 20, and it had a lot of debt. And so it was looking like dead money for a long time. Then about a month and a half ago, I think they've refinanced the debt at $45 billion. So that was bolstered by improved, vibes around the company, probably related directly to the political situation, but who knows why. But somehow they got that $45 billion, which probably let some of those debt holders get them off the balance sheet, get out of the deal that they probably regretted. And then the follow-up is to swap the equity and some of the debt for the significantly overpriced equity in the AI company, because AI has got, eye-watering valuations right now. So you're able to do that, take the overpriced valuation and use it to bail out the underwater equity in such a way that kind of solves two problems at once.
Yeah. I mean, sounds like just good, smart deal making.
I mean, if anyone got screwed here, it would be the equity investors in XAI who, invested at, I guess, an $85 billion valuation and then ended up owning a no-growth social network. But it's not a clear-cut case where it's a bad investment. It's just not exactly what they invested in. I want to talk about a different subject related to this, which is, do we think that the data in X is strategically valuable to an AI company? Because I've actually heard the opposite from informed sources saying, like, there's corpuses of data that are vastly more valuable. There is data you can buy, be it Reddit or New York Times, whatever, if you want to train your model, and the X data is not that valuable. But I actually not sure I agree with that, but that's the point of view I've heard. What do you think, Eric?
Sounds like we might be aligned on this one. If there's value in what, I don't know what you would call this group, but maybe the smartest, maybe the most internet addicted, maybe just the percentage of the people that are creating the majority of the content on X. If there's value in that data, if there's value in what people are talking about, if there's value in the sentiment, if there's value in the now to train an AI, like on the most immediate, real-time data, there's real value in X. And then it implies that there's real value in XAI. I don't want to put more words in your mouth, but I think we're thinking about this similarly.
I think I think that's right. And I would say that whereas, say, like a Cursor AI has got the best data about coding, and I assume they've licensed an enormous amount of data about coding, and as a result, they have a good coding product, and X does not have access to that necessarily unless they pay for it. What is the X data valuable for? Breaking news, etc. I wonder if you put aside costs and GPUs and stuff like that, which obviously costs will come down over time, could you use the X data to produce fully AI produced like nightly newscast?
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
Or like in the morning, many people listen to NPR for their short version, 5-10 minute program every morning. You could actually create a version of that entirely using X data.
You could probably have some very unique data that can inform financial decisions, stock trading, investing, like short-term stuff, and let alone like what these models over time can, point to in terms of trends. And then the other thing about XAI is they don't have to pay a dime for licensing outside of, the $45 billion, implicitly valuing the company. So there's value there.
On an inside baseball note, do you think Linda Yaccarino still has a CEO title?
I haven't heard otherwise.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I would assume X continues as X as an operating entity. And, there wouldn't be consolidation on that front. I mean, and maybe this should segue into the other news of the week related to X. There's commercial deals to still be done. So this article made its way around. Basically, Omnicom is giving clients incentives to spend on X. So I'll pull a quote from the article. We could talk about it. Clients who did not spend on X in 2024 are offered 50% in added value up to $200,000 for their investments on the platform during Q1 of 2025, according to a document called OMG X 2025 to 2026 Global Strategic Partnership. Give me your take on this.
I don't really have a take unless I find out the reason this is happening. Is there some guarantee payment that they're trying to work through? Is there an incentive coming from X to them? Are there political motivations? I don't really know. I think it's pretty well established that advertising on X is a bad idea, at least on the main timeline. And I think that most people in the industry kind of agree with that. And you can tell if you're an X user when you look at the ads, and the ads are all the worst possible ads you can imagine. Other than the special deals they have with like the NBA where you watch a clip and there's a pre-roll, the standard ads on X, I think, unambiguously are bad. So, you need incentives to get back into it, I guess.
I read this and this just sounds like sales incentives. Again, not knowing if there's anything behind it, right? What was the character's name in The Godfather? Mo Green. So I'm the Mo Green of ad networks. I made my bones during the days where you would start the quarter at 0 and you would try to figure out how to make your quarter. And oftentimes you would come up with incentive plans, right? Added value, free this, free that, discount on this, discount on that. When I read some of these quotes that are, supposedly directly from the sales materials, That's what I took away.
Yeah. All right. I guess I'm the Robert Duvall of ad tech. I'm not really sure. I'm definitely not tough enough to be the James Caan, and I'm not the Fredo, so it's a little bit tough to come around to where I fit in.
I'm not Mo Green, but I remember the line. All right, I retract. Let's talk about incentives. One more topic here before we call it. So I'm seeing something out there, and I want to get your take if this is a thing. So there are some incentives being pushed by big companies around demand side fees. So 2 articles this week. The first was Universal Ads, which is the new platform from Comcast, basically to for performance marketers and mid-market customers to buy CTV, led by James Burrow and the crew. They're charging 0 demand side fees. Obviously, there's fees for Freewheel and all that, but example 1, 0 demand side fees for buying CTV. Example 2, well-written article on Digiday. We'll point to it in the newsletter about the DSP market, but mostly about Amazon. Amazon lowering DSP rates to win new business. This seems to be a thing, right? Like 2 in a week, kind of a trend.
Know.
What's your take?
I don't know. The Universal Ads thing is funny for 2 reasons. The first is they're a seller. It's NBC, right? So why would they charge DSP fees? They're a seller, and
it's a platform.
They could sell.
They can,
but they set the rates. So, what's the point of a fee if you set the CPM rates? You could just make the CPM higher and not charge a fee. It's sort of meaningless to say you don't have a fee because they've carved that out as a new brand name. Also, the second thing that's weird about it is the type of customers are going for, those sort of performance-y e-commerce ones, don't care about fees at all. They care about ROAS. You can charge them 100%, not 100% fee. You can charge 99% fee. And if the ROAS is good, they keep advertising. The people who care about fees are the ones who don't have really good ROAS calculations, meaning brands and brand response type campaigns. So I don't really think that's relevant. I think the Amazon sort of attack on the open web, where they have said publicly they want to be the dominant DSP in open web, that should send chills down a lot of people's spines, because for so long we could say the Amazon DSP, oh yeah, that's just for, Amazon retail media, and then maybe do a little audience extension. They got Neil Richter, they have Brian Thomasette, they have like a murderer's row of talent over there, and they're going after it with very large budgets, and the Amazon, your margin is my opportunity. And, that's maybe the biggest story I've heard in ad tech in a while.
For sure. So maybe the Universal thing is a nothing burger, but if there's more and more of these instances of companies just saying, we're not charging fees, we're going to be aggressive on fees, perhaps there's a meta developing here that's going to put pressure on fees in market. And, it could spell, difficulty for other DSPs.
Yeah, I think the CTV market in particular has had fee pressure for a while because it just seems obvious you shouldn't be paying 15, 20%. And so much of CTV is on programmatic guaranteed and non-biddable ways of transacting. And as a result, the percentage of media fee doesn't make as much sense. This is all pressure on like the Trade Desk, who is 40% of the revenue I've heard is CTV. And, fees start compressing in that area. It's no bueno.
Yeah, agreed. Hey, before we go, just one other funny quick thing that hit the feed this week. So yesterday there was an article posted. Nielsen's patent lawsuit against VideoAmp was dismissed. And Ross McRae, the former CEO, founder, board member of VideoAmp, he posted on LinkedIn. I'll quote it verbatim. Haha, boomers at Nielsen can't even win the only thing they're good at anymore. Crazy face emoji, smiling emoji.
Love it.
I just thought it was funny.
Love it. Boomers, yeah. I have one patent to my name, and it's from my time at Nielsen. Nielsen loves their patents. There are so many of them.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was funny. We'll point to it in the newsletter. Everybody get a laugh. And with that, I think we got the news of the week.
All right. This was awesome. Yeah. The refresh. We renamed it the refresh. All right. This was awesome. We'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.